My name is Jack. I'm 48 years old and I spent over 2 decades in the U.S. Army, working in logistics. I wasn't the guy on the front line, but I was the one making sure supplies got there, planes stayed fueled, and people got what they needed to survive and finish the mission. After retiring, I thought stepping into the civilian world would be a smoother landing. I joined a private defense logistics company, thinking my experience would mean something. Turns out, outside the uniform, you're just another face in the room. In the military, people knew what I did. They respected it. Here I sit in meetings where my ideas get repeated by someone else, and suddenly they're brilliant. They clap for the flashy project leads who show up last minute with big speeches, while the real work, the planning, the spreadsheets that hold the whole operation together, stay buried under someone else's name. I once saved a $12 million shipment from going to the wrong base. No one even mentioned my name in the recap. They throw these office parties for deals I made possible, but I'm never on the email invite. Sometimes I show up anyway. People smile politely, ask if I'm new. I have a little office near the back. No windows. I keep a small photo of my unit in Fallujah on the desk, just to remind myself I wasn't always invisible. There's a plaque on the wall from the army. Here it's just decoration. It's not that I expect medals or applause. I just thought, after all those years, after all the nights I spent making sure the mission never failed, someone would notice when I kept doing it. But this place loves noise, not discipline. They love buzzwords, not systems. They love youth, not memory. There's a young guy here named Brandon. Fresh out of grad school, all charm, no clue. He once rerouted a delivery to the wrong hemisphere. They gave him a bonus for effort. I stayed late. 3 nights to fix it. They didn't even say thank you. I tell myself, it doesn't matter, that I'm not here for recognition, that I'm building something. But then Friday rolls around and I see them toasting another deal on the rooftop while I'm still at my desk adjusting delivery contracts. No one understands but me. Sometimes I think maybe I should have just stayed in. At least in the army, when someone depended on you, they said it to your face. At least in uniform, people saw you. Here I'm not Jack the retired major with 20 years of spotless service. I'm Jack the quiet guy near the copier, the one they call when something breaks. Then forget about the second it's fixed. It was late Friday afternoon when the email landed in my inbox. The subject line was sterile. Compensation review update. I already knew what it meant before I even clicked it. I stared at the screen for a second, my heart not racing, not nervous, just tired. Tired of hoping. When I opened it, the words hit like a cold slap. Due to current budgetary constraints and performance alignment metrics, we regret to inform you that your request for compensation adjustment cannot be accommodated at this time. I had to read it twice just to confirm they were really telling me no. Again. I'd been with this company 8 years. Never took a sick day. I was the one who showed up early, stayed late, took the overtime shifts no one else wanted. When the pandemic hit, I worked out of my garage for 3 months with a laptop propped on ammo crates. I built new inventory systems from scratch, while their younger hires were still figuring out how to mute themselves on Zoom. But none of that made it into the equation. Not my discipline. Not the fact that I'd kept 3 supply lines running during the hurricane last year. Not even the fact that I trained half the team they rely on now. Instead, I got buzzwords, budgetary constraints, strategic alignment. As if that could explain why Marcus got a retention bonus last quarter after messing up a shipment so bad it made the internal audit report. Marcus, 27, wears loafers without socks. Gives presentations with flashy graphics and no substance. They love him. He once suggested we replace our current inventory tracking with a mobile app he saw on Instagram. I told him it would compromise data security. He said I didn't get the new workflow. The same week he got that bonus, I spent 3 nights recalibrating the delivery timetables after his update threw the system out of sync. Not a word of thanks. Not even acknowledgement. Now here I was, looking at a 2-paragraph email, written like it was copied from a template. After 20 years in the military and 8 more here, they couldn't even send someone from HR to speak to me in person. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the screen. Then I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. I felt it in my chest, low and dull at first, like a weight settling. Then it burned. Not just anger, not just frustration. It was betrayal. All those years doing the quiet work, the dependable work, I thought it would eventually matter. I thought someone would see. But the truth was, they liked me invisible. Reliable but replaceable. Valuable but not valuable enough to reward. I looked around my office. Same 4 walls. Same old calendar with no meetings scheduled. The same stack of papers I'd been organizing for a process improvement proposal that no one had asked for. I'd been patient, respectful, a team player. But this was the last straw. Something snapped. I wasn't going to be silent anymore. I poured a drink that night and sat in my home office trying to clear my head. The walls were lined with framed service medals and a few grainy photos of me and the guys overseas, but my eyes kept drifting to the filing cabinet in the corner. That's when it hit me. I remembered the Vanguard contract. It was one of the biggest deals I ever touched after leaving the Army. A software suite built to manage logistics for high-volume military operations, tailored right down to the unit level. I spent months drafting that contract. Not just the usual clauses, but the technical specs, the data sharing frameworks, even the fallback protocols. I knew the system inside out, and I knew one thing most people didn't. Over time, data grows fast. I had added a clause, just one paragraph, tucked deep in the legal appendix. It said that if the system's data usage crossed 5 terabytes within a rolling 18-month period, a royalty fee would be triggered, paid directly to the consultant who designed the data infrastructure. At the time, no one blinked. Legal glanced at it. Vanguard's lawyers skimmed it. No one expected that threshold to ever be reached. The software was new, the usage modest. But I knew better. I'd seen how systems scaled during deployments, how small contracts ballooned once they got embedded into real-world operations. I wrote that clause with a calm hand, not out of greed, just as a safeguard. It was my insurance policy, a quiet move hidden in the noise of a multi-million-dollar deal. And now, years later, I started to wonder if that clause had finally come alive. I powered up my laptop and pulled up the back-end system. As a senior project lead on the original contract, I still had access. I opened the data logs, and there it was. 9 terabytes processed across 3 divisions. Sustained growth over 6 quarters. More than enough to trigger the clause. I sat back in my chair, the glass still in my hand. All those nights staying late. All those years going unnoticed. I'd never raised my voice, never demanded recognition. But I had written that clause. And now it was the one thing they couldn't ignore. They wanted to act like I didn't matter. But they didn't know I'd buried the one thing that could change everything. I wasn't just a worker. I was the architect of the system they now depended on. And that system owed me. I sat at my desk that night, fingers moving fast, heartbeat even faster. The company still hadn't locked me out of the legacy systems. I dug in deep. Every log, every performance metric, uptime percentages, data packet volume, user growth. It was all still there. I found the reports from the past 2 years. Not only had the usage passed 5 terabytes, it had crushed it. 9 terabytes in 1 quarter, 11 in another. 3 consecutive quarters, all above the line. It wasn't a fluke. It was sustained. Verified. Clean. I leaned in close, reading every line like it was a secret code only I could understand. This wasn't speculation. This was math. This was fact. They triggered the clause. Not once, not by accident, but consistently for over a year. I felt something rise in my chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even joy. It was something deeper. Validation. All those ignored emails. All the missed promotions. Every time they looked past me, none of it mattered anymore. I had something they couldn't brush off. I opened my personal contact list, found the number I hadn't dialed in years. Robert. My old JAG buddy from Fort Bragg. We'd sparred over contracts back in the day. He never missed a detail. He picked up on the second ring. Still had that calm lawyer voice. I asked him to pull up the old Vanguard deal. I told him about the clause, the volume, the triggers, everything. There was a pause. I could almost hear him flipping pages in his head. Then he said it. Yeah, that clause is real. And it's enforceable. I stood up from my chair, pacing the room now, my whole body buzzing. It was like the air shifted. I wasn't the guy in the corner anymore. I wasn't waiting for scraps. I had leverage. Millions, maybe more. Tied to a line in a document nobody else remembered. Except me. Robert offered to draft a preliminary notice. Said we could file a formal claim within days. Said he'd been waiting to go after these types of companies for years. I hung up the phone and stared out the window. The building across the street was lit up like always. Business as usual. But for me, nothing was usual anymore. The tables had turned. Quietly. Perfectly. They just didn't know it yet. The morning the payment freeze hit, everything shifted. Word got around fast, though no one said it out loud. Vanguard had locked the books. No more invoices processed. No more money flowing. People tried to stay calm, but you could see it in their eyes. Greg, the general counsel, pretended everything was fine. Same fake confidence, same stiff collar. But I saw the twitch in his jaw. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know from where. I stayed quiet. At my desk, I organized files, reviewed the old contract again. On the outside, I looked like I was still doing my usual background work. Inside, I was building a case. Line by line, timestamp by timestamp. That afternoon, I caught a strange alert in the system. Someone had flagged the royalty clause. Then 5 minutes later, the flag was deleted. Not revised. Deleted. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just made a note and saved a screenshot. That was their first mistake. By Thursday, the panic had grown legs. Everyone was whispering about the freeze, trying to piece together what it meant. Then came the knock. Kyle stood at my office door, shoulders tense, eyes darting behind him. Just a junior analyst, probably no more than 26. Clean tie, nervous energy, but smart. He closed the door behind him and sat down without waiting. He said he'd been asked to delete some old contract tags. Told it was cleanup. Nothing serious. But when he saw my name next to the clause, he hesitated. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew something wasn't right. I looked him straight in the eye and told him he was right to pause. Told him not to say a word to anyone else. Just watch. Document. Track everything. Every deletion. Every change. Every order. His shoulders dropped a little, like he finally had a direction. He asked what they were trying to hide. I told him they were trying to cover a mistake. And in doing so, they were committing something much worse. Kyle became my eyes inside the newer systems. He flagged hidden logs, archived threads, Slack messages they thought were long gone. He brought me evidence I never would have found alone. And I taught him what to look for. We worked in silence, often passing notes or syncing drives in shared folders labeled with bland project names. Every piece we collected made the picture clearer. They hadn't just overlooked the clause. They'd deliberately buried it. And now, in trying to erase it, they were tampering with records. Violating protocol. Violating law. The deeper we went, the more reckless they became. Chad, the CFO, started ordering mass deletions, clauses, logs, audit trails, all gone within hours. But we had backups, screenshots, email headers, metadata. I kept it all. One night, Kyle forwarded me a redacted version of the quarterly review draft. The clause section was completely missing, not marked obsolete. Just gone. That was their second mistake. We met outside the building that night. Cold air, quiet street. I handed him a flash drive with copies of everything we'd compiled so far. He slipped it into his pocket without a word. I told him this was bigger than a raise or a bonus. This was about truth. Kyle asked what would happen next. I told him the company was walking straight into a trap. Their own trap. Every time they deleted something, they tightened the noose. We weren't making the case. They were building it for us. Each document, each lie, each quiet command passed down the chain. It all told the same story. They thought they could erase me. Erase the contract. Erase the truth. But all they did was give me more proof. Kyle started to change. He stood straighter, asked sharper questions. He knew now what he was part of. He wasn't just some analyst cleaning up spreadsheets. He was a whistleblower in the making. By the end of the week, we had everything. Enough to trigger the clause. Enough to show willful cover-up. Enough to call it fraud. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Calm. I'd seen worse during war. But this time, the battlefield was a boardroom. They thought I was out of the game, but I was just getting started. The all-hands meeting was set for 3 p.m. They said it was about new strategy goals, but I knew better. I sat near the back folder in hand, watching the room fill with fake smiles and nervous energy. Brett stood up front, flanked by Greg and Chad. Same polished confidence, same rehearsed tone. He started talking about growth, efficiency, momentum. Nobody really listened. Then the door opened. 2 men in suits stepped in. Sharp, silent, straight to the front. Robert led the way, crisp, black folder in hand. The room shifted like someone cut the power. He didn't ask to speak. Just handed the folder to Brett. The CEO's face went pale before he even opened it. Inside was everything. The original contract, data logs, the emails, the clause. Robert turned to the room, voice low but steady. He listed the charges clearly. Breach of contract, intellectual property violation, destruction of records, fraud. The room went dead quiet. You could feel the air get heavy. Brett looked stunned. Greg stared down at the table. Chad tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. I stood up slowly, folder in hand. For the first time, all eyes were on me. I walked to the front, next to Robert, opened my folder and laid out copies. I told them what they had done, showed them what they had tried to bury. Every document, every edit, every missing tag. Greg tried to interrupt, but Robert cut him off. He reminded them that Vanguard had already frozen all payments. That legal action was pending, that it was no longer internal. I looked straight at Brett, told him they knew about the clause, that the data breach had triggered it twice, that they had deleted flags, tampered with files, and hoped no one would notice. The silence was total. No spin, no excuses. Just the cold truth in black and white. I could see it in their faces. The shock, the fear, the realization that they had underestimated the wrong man. I wasn't just the quiet veteran in the corner anymore. I was the one with the proof, the one they couldn't silence. Robert made it clear. Settle or face a public lawsuit. And Vanguard wasn't going to wait. Brett swallowed hard, trying to keep control. But the room had already turned. I'd spent years invisible. In this moment, I was the only one that mattered. I turned and walked back to my seat. Not because I was finished, but because they were. After the fallout, things changed fast. Brett announced a full restructuring, but it was clear who'd really pulled the strings. Chad was gone by week's end. Greg stopped speaking in meetings. The same people who used to ignore me now avoided eye contact altogether. I stepped into my new office as director of compliance with a strange calm. The room used to feel cold, like I didn't belong. Now it felt like it had been waiting for me. I didn't walk in to settle scores. I walked in to fix what had been broken for years. Kyle joined my team without hesitation. I saw myself in him. Sharp, quiet, observant. He had principles, and that mattered more than experience. I told him we weren't just here to check boxes. We were going to clean house. We started by reviewing the books. Not just recent numbers, but the stuff buried under years of red tape. And the deeper we dug, the uglier it got. Misused funds. Fake invoices. Shadow contracts that reeked of corruption. At first I thought I'd feel satisfied exposing it. But the truth was, it made me tired. Angry, yes, but also tired. This place had rotted from the inside, while people like me were too quiet for too long. Still, I didn't back down. We documented everything. Every expense. Every signature. I made it clear this wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. About fixing the system before it destroyed someone else. I mentored Kyle through every step. Showed him what to look for, how to follow the paper trail. He picked it up fast. And every time we uncovered something new, he didn't just take notes. He understood why it mattered. This wasn't about money anymore. I had what I needed. A raise. A title. Recognition. But I didn't care about any of that. What mattered was the truth. And knowing that for the first time in years I was finally being heard. The email came in on a quiet Tuesday morning. Subject line said, "Updated compensation package." I opened it slowly, not because I was nervous, but because I already knew what was inside. It listed the new title. Executive Director of Compliance. Salary adjusted bonus, added retroactive payout attached. The kind of recognition most people would be thrilled to see. But I didn't feel anything close to joy. I stared at the screen, then leaned back in my chair. After everything, this felt like a formality, something they had to do. Not because they believed in me, but because they had no choice left. I remembered the first time I asked for a raise, how I'd crafted that email carefully, full of metrics and reasons. I never even got a reply. Now, years later, they were offering what I once begged for without me asking at all. I hit reply, typed 3 lines. Thank you for the update. Please confirm the retroactive details are being submitted to legal for review. Let me know if anything further is required on my end. I didn't sign it with a smile or a thank you. Just Jack. Nothing more. I closed the email and looked out the window. The office buzzed around me, same noise as always. But something inside me had changed. Respect doesn't come from a title. It comes from how you carry yourself when no one's looking. I'd been overlooked, dismissed, even erased. But I didn't fold. Now I wasn't just part of the company. I was part of the change. The real kind. The kind that lasts. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel bitter. I felt like I had finally come home.